Okay, hello everybody and welcome to an information seminar this morning. It's a beautiful day here in New Zealand and I'm extremely excited to show you a brand new science. My name is Gail Pearson. I'm a specialist anaesthetic doctor from Auckland, New Zealand in private practice. And I've got a passion for health and wellness, but however, I'm also open to any healing modality that's around as long as we get the basic aim of health and wellness. I've become extremely fortunate to have been introduced to a natural way of altering your genetic makeup through the science of nutrigenomics. So this is a new science acting through your genes. And last, we've got some scientific backup to validate what people have been observing for many, many years using natural compounds. I can explain this, but I would like to introduce someone who's going to explain it a lot better than I can and also in more depth. So I'd like to introduce our Vice President, Dr. Brian Dixon, and I'll just read a little bit of his bio, and I will have to read it because it is so in-depth and it is pretty amazing what he has done so far and what he is continuing to do with anti-aging and health and wellness products. So Brian earned his PhD in molecular and cellular biology from the Oregon State University, and that was associated with the Linus Pauling Institute. So he focuses research on underlying biochemical mechanisms of the aging process and therapeutic potentials of alpha-lipoic acid. And then he went off to do postdoctoral work, evaluating the bioavailability of lipoic acid and also seeing how it affected the deteriorating with age. He's authored scientific peer-reviewed manuscripts on lots of topics such as antioxidants, cellular signaling, gene regulation, stress coping mechanisms, NRF2, weight management, sports nutrition, recovery following intense exercise, role of nutrition recovery from surgery, inflammation, and on and on and on it goes. He's also researched nutrients such as glutathione, vitamin D, plant polyphenols, and other phytonutrients. And he's also authored a book. As I said, it just goes on and on. He's been in the nutritional industry for over 10 years, and we're so fortunate to have him with us now in this company. And he actually is managing clinical trials and looking at health development, education, public speaking, and teaching us what we need to know about health and wellness. And so he's also been involved in 7 different patents in terms of nutritional products. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Brian Dixon, our Senior Vice President for LifeVantage. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thank you for having me, Gail, and thank you for the very kind introduction. And I should warn everybody, before I start to share my video, I've got the corporate headshot there. That's pre-coronavirus, Brian, and now you've got post-coronavirus, Brian. But pleasure to be on today. And yeah, I want to talk about health and then maybe a new dogma of health within the nutritional industry. So let me start by asking you all, how many people out there really consider yourselves truly healthy? And I know you Kiwis consider yourselves very healthy people, but I want you to really dig deep. Are you truly healthy in every single way? So coming back to my years in aging research, there's this notion of the aging continuum, or it's also known as the frailty continuum. And this is incredibly important, especially around the extreme elderly. So as we get older and maybe we need to be institutionalized, hospitalized, it's really important for these caretakers and these medical professionals to identify exactly when their patients start to fall out of perfect health and first become a little bit frail or fragile, because these medical professionals want to intervene as absolutely quickly as possible to drive them back to optimal health. The problem can be is if you don't intervene soon enough, you can start to move the wrong way on this aging continuum and go in a direction that no one wants to go. But I started thinking about this notion of the aging or frailty continuum and thought, you know what, you can actually apply this to almost every single aspect of our health. So let me ask you, do you know the last time you were at the physician? What did your medical numbers come back? What was your blood pressure, your triglycerides? What was your resting glucose levels? What's your weight? What's that number staring back at you on the scale? Right? So when we're talking about health, we're not just maybe talking about overall health and ability to jump out of bed and go do things, but are we truly healthy in every single way? And for us, it really comes down to these 6 pillars of health. And quite frankly, if you're not doing any one of these, there's no way that you could be in optimal health. And this is where we have to start being very self-reflective and understanding where we are with our health. So are you moving or exercising every day? I mean, I wish I had a quick fix or a magic bullet for that, but I'm sorry, we still have to exercise at least the majority of the days every single week. We need to eat healthy, and no, that does not include white bread sandwiches and mayonnaise. Community, this one's really interesting. There is so much research around the health benefits of getting together with your friends, your family, and your loved ones, and just enjoying life, laughing, joking, talking, working through issues. This is an incredibly important aspect and pillar of our health. Sleep, I think we're going to see sleep be a new frontier. The health benefits that are related to getting enough sleep are indisputable. And the opposite is also true. So when we're not getting enough sleep, it is linked to a number of health conditions. Mindfulness. Are you really present in your day-to-day activities? Are you present when you're eating dinner with your family? Or maybe are you putting your phones away? Are you present when you're thinking about your food? You know, so many of us are guilty about driving up to our favorite takeaway restaurants, just grabbing our foods and horsing it down our faces as we're driving to the next thing. But the research has shown if we're really present with our food and thinking about what we're eating, we tend to eat less calories, be healthier, and have a healthier body weight. And then lastly is environment. So obviously we're talking about the environment around us, but a lot of us feel out of control maybe with that environment. You know, I think we should all be doing everything in our powers to make sure we keep our environment as clean and pure as when we found it. But maybe that seems overwhelming. Maybe we're also talking about the environment maybe inside of our houses. I mean, there are studies that have shown the air pollution inside of our homes can be far greater than even the worst days out in our environment. So open windows, let the air come through. What are you putting on your body? Are you using clean personal care products? So really these exposures become incredibly important. So as you're thinking about that, are we truly healthy in every single aspect? Or if you're truly honest with yourself, might there be a thing or two that you would like to work on? Where is every single aspect of your health at on this health continuum? And again, be honest. Or is there something that maybe you can work on? And what are those tiny little steps that you're going to take to start moving these health measures back in the right direction? Now, let me ask you another question. Do you actually control your health span? Or is this just like a poker game and we have to play the hand that we were dealt? And what's so interesting, going back in my aging research, just even 10 years ago, we talked about the rules of three. So we'll start with genetics. A lot of people thought that you had no control over your genetics, and this was that poker hand that you had to play. We'll come back to that in a second. Then it's the environment. It's obviously very important where we live and how we're living, and again, that environment in our house and those personal care products that we're using. And then lifestyle. I think everybody would agree with me that you can control what you put in your mouth and whether or not you're exercising, right? But let's come back to genetics. This has become a very interesting field. So back in my time in aging research, we always just talked about having majority control of your health span. You can control your lifestyle and you can control your environment, but there was nothing you could do about your genetics. And it's true, you cannot change your primary DNA sequence, right? That instruction manual that lives inside of the nucleus of every one of our cells. But some interesting research centered around nutrigenomics is showing us that utilizing nutrition, we can actually control whether or not genes are turned on and even turned off in times when we don't want them. And these nutritional signals are actually working through the cell's communication network called cell signaling pathways to actually flip these switches and activate this very important class of genes. Now, these genes have interesting names. They're called adaptive genes, they're called anti-stress genes, they're called survival genes. So you can see just by the names themselves how important that they are. So how can we apply this notion of nutrigenomics to human nutrition? So let's talk a little bit about that. So the easiest way for me to talk about this is through some theories of aging. Um, I like the oxidative stress theory of aging. It's probably the most studied theory of aging that's out there, second to the mitochondrial theory of aging. And then there's a relatively new theory of aging that's centered around this molecule called NAD and this family of proteins called the sirtuins. So let's talk about each of these and why they're important. And maybe if these theories of aging don't resonate with you, maybe another way to think about them are the health benefits that are associated with each of these. So things like protection, promoting energy production, or vitality, right? Just great things I think we all want to feel in our lives. So let's talk about this oxidative stress theory of aging. This oxidative stress theory of aging states that we are constantly exposed to free radicals and oxidants. And these free radicals and oxidants can go on to have very dire consequences to the cell. So what we want to do is keep our oxidant or free radical load in a nice balance, right? So we don't want to shut it off completely, and we don't want it, obviously, this overexposure to occur. But what we need to do is keep it in check. And there's this beautiful system that lives inside of our cell called the NRF2 pathway. And I know it's complicated scientific jargon, so forgive me for that. But think of NRF2 as just being this little sensor molecule that's living inside of the cell. And it's waiting to come in contact with a free radical, an oxidant, or even a toxin. And then it gets activated, goes into the nucleus, and literally flips these switches on these survival and protection genes, okay? But if we wanted to test this in a laboratory, what might that look like? So what we can do is actually use a number of nutrients. We can take then cells, put them in a test tube. We know the switches that we're trying to activate, right? The NRF2 switch. And then if we can do that, we can experience all of these health benefits. So NRF2 is very well defined, and it's known what genes that NRF2 controls, and it's somewhere between 200 to 300 different genes. So we can look at a couple of them that are known to be regulated by NRF2, go back to the laboratory, and we can look and see if we can activate these genes through these nutritional interventions. And so this was some latest research that we have done, where we're able to repeat a number of studies that have been conducted at LifeVantage, but we're able to see in just 24 hours, we can increase one of these genes known to be regulated by NRF2 by 40%, and another gene regulated by NRF2 by 51%, again, in just 24 hours. So that's the oxidative stress theory of aging. There's another theory of aging that's very similar to the free radical or oxidative stress theory of aging, and that's called the mitochondrial theory of aging. The mitochondrial theory of aging states that as we get older, our mitochondria don't work as efficiently as they used to. And if you're not familiar with what the mitochondria are or do, they're like these little rooms inside of our cell that are responsible for making almost all of the energy that our body needs to function every second of every day. In fact, if you were to shut off mitochondrial function, we would all be dead in just a matter of seconds. So as these mitochondria are aging, they're starting to produce free radicals. And I should also say that even the healthiest of mitochondria when we're young are producing a small quantity of free radicals and other oxidants. But as we get older, this gets exacerbated, and it goes on to continue to damage the mitochondria. The mitochondria become less efficient. They create more free radicals and oxidants, and you can see how we get this downward spiral of effect. So what we want to do is provide nutrients to, one, support overall mitochondrial function, but then we can also trigger another cell signaling pathway to help the cell trigger the mitochondria to turn over. So what we want to do is remove the old and damaged mitochondria from the cell and put new healthy ones in its place. And a major protein that controls that function is a protein called NRF1. So again, if you'll put your scientific hats on, we'll run a similar type of experiment. So we'll look at the different inputs or nutrients that we want to utilize to activate NRF1. We know the switch that we want to affect, the NRF1 pathway. And if we can do that, we can afford a number of health benefits related to energy production. Okay, so again, this is exactly what we've done. It's well known what genes are regulated by NRF1. So we go to the laboratory, we do these genetic studies, which are, for a molecular biologist, pretty easy to do. And we can look at the upregulation of these genes. And again, in just 24 hours with these simple nutritional interventions, we can increase the activity of these genes by 65 and 71%. So clear proof that we can utilize nutrition to actually turn on these very important genes. And then the last one, the sirtuin theory of aging. It's a relatively new theory of aging. And it's really centered around a very interesting concept that's related to energy production. So energy production requires us to metabolize our food, and that happens again in the mitochondria. So can you also see how all of these are linked? So when food is getting into our mitochondria, the mitochondria are breaking the bonds on this food and literally releasing the electrons in those chemical bonds of the food that we eat, and it's capturing it. And it's captured on this molecule called NAD. Now, there's this interesting phenomenon of caloric restriction. Caloric restriction is this notion where if we reduce our caloric intake by just 60, well, just up to 60%. So between 40 to 60%, we can actually increase the lifespan of these various experimental models. So this discovery was originally made in yeast. They then went on to look at it in fruit flies, in some simple worms. They've looked at this in mice, rats, and they've even started studying this in various primates. And this notion of this severe caloric restriction, the worst diet you've ever been on in your life, has this effect of increasing lifespan. So we can do similar things. We can test the efficacy of various nutritional inputs as it relates to this NAD pathway. And if we can affect this NAD pathway, we can also experience a number of different health benefits. And we want to do this by centering around the body's ability to produce its own NAD. In fact, you cannot take NAD from the diet and appreciably increase your levels of NAD. So what we want to do is increase the body's production or ability to make NAD. But you might be asking, Brian, why is that so important? So if we come back to those caloric restriction studies that I was talking about, so that severe reduction in calories that we're eating every single day, researchers want to know how that was working. So through some genetic studies, they identified this family of proteins known as the sirtuins, right? Another complicated name. This family of protein, when they did further genetic studies and removed the sirtuins out of the experimental models, either through genetic manipulations or maybe pharmaceutical interventions, they found that then when they calorically restricted these experimental models, they lost the increase in lifespan. So as you can imagine, people got incredibly interested in these sirtuin proteins. So they started to ask the question, well, how does this work? Well, it turns out this family of proteins called the sirtuins requires this molecule called NAD that's normally found in the mitochondria and responsible for energy production. But a very long scientific study short, what they found is as you're calorically restricting your diet, so there's less food around to metabolize, your levels of NAD actually increase. And when those levels increase, NAD itself actually becomes a signaling molecule to trigger the activity of these sirtuins. So I know that's a complicated scientific story, but I hope you're with me. So all of these health benefits centered around NAD and the activity of this family of proteins called the sirtuins, okay? So here's actually that biochemical pathway in our bodies that makes NAD. And I just put this up there to show that it's a very complicated process, but it's a complicated stepwise process that we can kind of tease apart and look at. it turns out in this biochemical pathway that's related to the vitality of our overall well-being, there are two enzymes that are absolutely essential to make NAD. Okay, so we then ask the questions, could we nutrigenomically affect and increase these enzymes? So we went to the laboratory, did exactly the same studies that we had talked about, and for these two essential proteins, we saw a modest increase of 12%. But then the real question becomes, does this modest 12% increase in these NAD biosynthetic genes appreciably affect sirtuin activity? So when we go back and we look at the scientific literature of how much sirtuin activity can be upregulated by caloric restriction, we see that that can be upregulated as much as 94%, a massive, almost doubling of the activity of this family of enzymes. And when we look at our product, these nutrients found within our product, Protandim NAD Synergizer, we found that we could increase the activity of this family of proteins by 100%. So rivaling what's been shown with caloric restriction studies. And now I don't know if anybody's been paying special attention to what's been going on in the media, but there's a number of companies now that are marketing what's going on or marketing NAD products. So just for fun, in our same experiments, we looked at some of the competition, and in that same 24-hour period, we only saw a 2% in the activity of this very important family of proteins, the sirtuins. And so by doing that, we're able to increase all sorts of things around our brain health, things like mental focus and concentration, positive mood and motivation, both physical and mental energy, helping your body promote a healthy inflammatory response, maintaining cholesterol levels already in the normal range, and then a healthy cardiovascular system. So a lot of health benefits by activating this family of proteins, the sirtuins. But for us, where this research gets incredibly exciting is when you actually look at the power of synergy. And so we had the notion to then run all three of these nutrients found in our products through those same experiments. And we asked the questions, what did they do? And what we found was that when you actually combined these three products, so the nutrients found in these three products, we found that with all of those genes that we were testing, we saw as much as a 1900% increase in the activity of the genes. And so we love this combination of products together. And this is exactly how we can utilize nutrigenomics to help tip that health scale in your favor and utilize these nutrients to help activate and flip these switches on the genes to help further protect you, help promote energy production, and help with that feeling of vitality. So if we come back to that health span slide, again, I'm sure we all agree that you can control your lifestyle. And I think we've all heard the expression from our moms and grandmas, you are what you eat. But a couple fun sayings as well on this slide. You're also a product of your exposures. So that healthy environment is also incredibly important. And then lastly, this genetic sequence that we have inside of all of our cells is not this poker hand that we have to play. We can affect this through nutritional interventions. And so you actually are also a product of what you express. And that's why the tagline for us at LifeVantage and around these three powerful products together is flip the switch, feel better, do more. So I hope that gives you just a little bit of a background into why our products are so powerful and how we are continuing to innovate in this nutritional space. So thank you very much for your time, everybody.
And thank you, Brian. I mean, I love the way you explain science. I mean, I'm a scientist, so I love the depth that you go into. And I'm sure people are maybe a little bit lost, but they see the impact of a healthy lifestyle. And they understand that, you know, sitting on the couch all day, eating junk food and going to bed late at night really is not good for your health, but we're giving them something else as well. And not only are we giving them the chance to reduce their oxidative stress, their chance to make healthy mitochondria, which are the breathing parts of the cell, and not have to undergo caloric restriction, which is huge, and all of them working together to promote absolutely ultimate health and wellness. That is absolutely fantastic. Now, the really exciting thing for New Zealand here is that NAD, as part of the Tri-Synergizer, is being launched in New Zealand. And we are fortunate because the United States is the only other country in the world that has it at the moment. And so we are leading the way yet again as Kiwis to have NAD in our country. It's coming to our shores on Tuesday, June the 9th, and it'll be available all on the websites. So if you do want to order this or add this to your order, if you're an existing customer or distributor, please just contact whoever invited you to this webinar today. And if you become a customer, you have your own independent site, there's nothing that you need to do in terms of joining fees or anything like that. You can cancel, you can alter, you can add to your subscription whenever you want. And these are such amazing products. And I just want everybody to be on them, and I want the word to get out there as quickly as I possibly can. And, you know, Kiwis just do it well, and we do it first. And please just let's get on the bandwagon and support this, and to show people what they can really do with their lives. And I'd like to thank everybody very much to being on today, and let you know that there is another webinar on now, which is on this webinar ID 966 989 967 9719. It's a password 8888. And this is one to go more in depth of the NAD pathway and how it actually works. So thank you for your time today, and we'll look forward to seeing you sometime.